So let's start with Homegrown. Natalie Renew is the director of Homegrown, a collaborative of philanthropic funders who came together last year with the mission of improving quality and access to home-based care. Homegrown's work is unique and really special in a few ways. First, the group is committed to supporting all home-based caregivers, including family, friends, and neighbor caregivers, as well as licensed family child care providers. These caregivers, mostly low-income women, are really the backbone of our nation's child care system. They serve roughly 7 million children under the age of 5, mostly infants and toddlers, children with special needs, and those living in low-income and rural communities. The demand for home-based care is only growing right now with the COVID-19 crisis and the closure of center-based care in so many places. Second, the group has a strengths-based approach. There are lots of wonderful reasons that parents choose home-based care for their children. I chose it for my children. But across all their work, they're seeking to fund work that defines, measures, and most importantly, scales what's effective in this environment. And they also know that home-based childcare sector faces many challenges. So this group of funders proactively supports innovation in the space, as well as policy change and movement building, all with the goal of increasing quality and access to home-based childcare. Members of the collaborative include the folks you see on your screen. So Natalie, you were really just less than a year in with Homegrown when COVID-19 hit, and you've done a remarkable job of reorienting your work to respond to this emergency for caregivers. Can you tell me a little bit about how you've adapted?
Yeah, thank you, Kaylee. It's really great to be with you today. COVID-19 has created significant hardship for home-based childcare providers. We're seeing significant challenges to this community of caregivers and providers, disruption of operation, significant loss of income, concerns for their own health and mental health, that of their own families and of the children and the families that they serve, and also challenges and an inability to find and afford critical sanitation and protective gear, and even in some communities to find food. So we really know that this community of providers and caregivers is struggling. And so in response, Homegrown created an emergency funding approach that creates both a toolkit and a national fund to support these really diverse home-based childcare providers across the country. Our toolkit is a case-making tool for funders that highlights the importance of home-based childcare providers and the work they do to support families and their critical needs right now. And it's also a very tactical roadmap for community-based intermediaries to create local emergency funds for home-based providers. Alongside that, our members have created a national fund to provide catalyzing funds to local communities who establish emergency funds using the toolkit. We're currently finalizing the selection based on an application, but anticipate funding about 14 funds across the country. We had many, many more great applications and really know from this process how significant the need is to support home-based providers in accessing relief and emergency funding. And then lastly, we're sort of building a community of practice around these funds and intend to convene the funds who are both being supported by Homegrown or those that are using the toolkit to share learning, to problem solve, and to really think about how the data and the experiences of providers in these emergency funds can advance our movement around home-based childcare and address ongoing policy gaps.
It's clear that you have a vision and are pushing for policy responses as well. And this is so important because you know that we have huge challenges hitting a childcare sector that was already facing this underlying crisis of affordability, access, and quality. So you just released an initial set of policy recommendations for this time. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So right now we're seeing that home-based providers are disproportionately operating to support the essential workforce, and anticipate that parent demand will, continue to focus on home-based childcare in the near term and the recovery phase. We also know that this is the lowest resource aspect of the childcare sector. And so
Yeah.
this seems like a really critical time to address the structural needs of home-based childcare, as well as to support the families who use this care option as that group of families grows. So our state leader and administrator guide is really a call to leaders and administrators to intentionally include and plan for the sustainability of home-based childcare. And it outlines a set of resources that are currently available to states to think about this, including the federal stimulus opportunities, new flexibility in key programs, as well as private philanthropic assets that can be leveraged to support home-based providers. We have many recommendations in the report and really encourage you all to take a look, but I'll just call out one which we really feel is critical to the support of home-based care, both in this moment, responding to the immediate needs, but also long-term as we think about what sustainability and ongoing stability looks like. And that is the need for comprehensive staff family childcare networks that ensure that home-based care providers have access to quality supports, to business and sustainability supports, and that they are able to connect children and families to critical services, health, mental health, and social supports. So again, lots of recommendations in there, but really want to call out the opportunity we see now to ensure that networks and infrastructure that deploy resources to providers and to families can be reinforced or can be established during this time.
Yeah, it's this seems to be the moment to have that kind of positive change take place in this policy shift. So can you give us an example of how these two different parts of your response work in practice?
Sure. So we are working with the emergency funds to collect data, including provider and family stories, and hope that we can leverage that information and those experiences for policy change. We really see this information as being kind of critical to continuing to drive narrative change around the importance of home-based care, and also to describe gaps in response as well as ongoing needs, and sort of see the opportunity to also work with providers to connect them to some of these sustaining infrastructure like networks as a critical opportunity. So we have seen incredible designs of how different communities are rolling out their emergency funds, but we'll kind of call out one of our grantees in South Carolina, Greenville First Steps, who is linking providers who receive emergency funds to a shared services alliance to provide ongoing business supports. So in addition to the relief component, there is a connection to an ongoing, more intentional support around business sustainability. And we're really excited to see many examples of those kinds of leveraging emergency funding to ongoing and sustainable support.
That is so fantastic. Thank you so much. So for the folks listening today, how can they support your work? What can the early childhood community do?
Absolutely. So for local communities, local funders, intermediaries, and local champions, we encourage you to take a look at the toolkit and to think about how or whether you might establish an emergency fund in your community, or how you might more intentionally include home-based providers in emergency funds that are already in your community. For national funders and partners, as I described, we had really an overwhelming response to our application for seed and catalyzing funding, and would encourage you to discuss if you might want to join us in supporting the national effort around catalyzing regional emergency funds. And then for advocates and policymakers and, and folks who support them, encourage you to take a look at our state administrator and leader resource guide, and get that into the hands of the right people, and really to sort of encourage and remind folks to intentionally include home-based providers during this time, and as we start to think about what the future holds, how we can more intentionally include home-based providers, because we know what an important asset they are to children, families, and communities.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Okay, folks, you will see that poll on your screen to connect with Natalie. Remember, again, the primary purpose is connection. So if you think you can help her with her partnership goals, if you want support in how to be an advocate and a champion for the work that she's doing, or if you have another idea, you can take this step to connect to learn more.